You are firing me for being pregnant. I'll make sure you regret it. Ah!
My name is Rachel Chen. Remember that name. The Chen part matters. I started at Patterson and Associates as a junior financial analyst straight out of Northwestern. 22 years old, eager, hungry, willing to work weekends and holidays. I wanted that corner office, that nameplate, that proof I'd made it. Victoria Patterson was already a legend when I arrived. 43 years old, the only woman in the executive suite. She'd clawed her way to the top of a male-dominated industry by being smarter, tougher, and more ruthless than any man in the building. I admired her. We all did. She wore power suits that cost more than my rent. She never smiled in meetings. She had this way of looking at you that made you feel inspired and terrified at the same time. The men called her the Ice Queen behind her back. She wore it like armor. Women can't afford to be soft in this business, she told me during my first review. You want respect? You earn it by being 10 times better than everyone else. Never give them a reason to question your commitment. I took that to heart. For 6 years, I worked 70-hour weeks. I brought in clients. I closed deals. I made Patterson and Associates $7 million in new business. $7 million. I have the documentation. I became senior analyst at 25, associate at 27. I was on track for junior partner by 30. Victoria mentored me personally. Client dinners, networking events. She taught me how to negotiate, how to command a room, how to make men twice my age take me seriously. You remind me of myself, she told me once after I'd closed a difficult deal. Ambitious, focused, willing to sacrifice. At the time, I thought it was the highest compliment. I didn't realize she meant it as a warning about what she'd expect from me forever. I met Daniel at a charity gala. I was there representing the firm. He was there because, well, I didn't know why at the time. He was handsome in that understated way. Kind eyes. Easy smile. We talked about everything except work. He never mentioned what he did. I didn't ask. 8 months of dating before he told me. My family owns Chen Capital, he said over dinner one night. Private equity. 20 billion in assets. My grandfather founded it. My father runs it. And I'm the managing director. Chen Capital. Everyone in finance knew that name. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Because I wanted you to see me. Not my bank account. Just me. We married 6 months later. Small ceremony. I kept my maiden name professionally, Rachel Chen. The industry knew me as Chen. My reputation was built on that name. Only HR knew I was Rachel Chen Morrison. Only a few people knew my husband was Daniel Morrison. And Victoria Patterson? She had no idea. That detail would cost her everything. I got pregnant 3 years into our marriage. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't unwelcome either. Daniel was thrilled. His parents were overjoyed. My parents started calling daily with advice and baby name suggestions. Meme? I was terrified. Not of being a mother. I wanted that. But of what it would mean for my career. For everything I'd built. I'd seen what happened to women at the firm who got pregnant. The sideways looks in meetings. The subtle questions about commitment and priorities. The way they'd suddenly get passed over for promotions with vague explanations about optics and client confidence. I'd watched Sarah Martinez, one of our best analysts, come back from maternity leave only to find her biggest clients had been temporarily reassigned to male colleagues. Those assignments became permanent. Sarah left 6 months later. I'd watched Jennifer Walsh get pushed out after her second pregnancy. The demands of motherhood, they called it in her exit interview, as if she'd chosen to leave. I knew the game. I knew the rules. So I made a plan. I'd work through my pregnancy. I'd prove I could still close deals, still bring in revenue, still be just as committed as I'd always been. I'd work until the day I delivered if I had to. I'd take the minimum maternity leave. I'd come back stronger. I told Victoria at 3 months. Professional. Straightforward. Already prepared with my transition plan. Congratulations, she said. The word fell flat from her lips, completely hollow. She leaned back in her leather chair, studying me with those calculating eyes. I assume you've thought about how this will affect your workload? I've outlined a complete plan for client management during my leave, I said, sliding a folder across her polished desk. I'll work remotely as much as possible. I'm not taking more than 6 weeks. Most of our communication is digital anyway, so. 6 weeks, Victoria interrupted, her voice sharp. And you think that's sufficient? It's what Sarah took. It's what Jennifer. Sarah and Jennifer aren't here anymore, are they? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I'm not Sarah or Jennifer, I said carefully, keeping my voice steady. My track record speaks for itself. I brought in 1.2 million this quarter alone. Victoria smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted weakness. Rachel, let me be very clear with you. I've built this firm by making hard decisions, by putting the business first. Always. She paused, letting the words sink in. Pregnancy changes things. It changes priorities. It changes focus. It changes commitment. My commitment hasn't changed. Not yet, she said, cutting me off again. But it will. It always does. The late nights become impossible. The travel becomes complicated. The client dinners conflict with daycare pickup. And suddenly, the woman who was on track for partner becomes adequate. The word hung in the air like poison. I've seen it 100 times, Victoria continued, her voice cold and clinical. Brilliant women who throw away everything they've built because biology convinced them they could have it all. You can't. No one can. You have to choose. I'm not choosing, I said firmly, my hands clenched in my lap. I can do both. She laughed, actually laughed. A short, bitter sound. We'll see, she said, turning her attention back to her computer screen. A clear dismissal. I stood, gathered my folder, and walked to the door. Rachel. Victoria called just as I reached for the handle. I turned. Don't prove me right, she said, but her eyes said she expected nothing else. The changes started small, so small that if I mentioned them, I'd sound paranoid. My largest client, a tech startup we'd been courting for 8 months, was suddenly reassigned for better coverage to Marcus Chen, a junior associate with half my experience and a quarter of my track record. Victoria's explanation? Marcus doesn't have any upcoming absences that might disrupt the relationship. Translation: Marcus isn't pregnant. My invitation to the annual leadership retreat, the one where partnerships were discussed, where careers were made, was quietly revoked. Given your condition, we thought you'd prefer to rest, Victoria's assistant told me via email. Not even a phone call. I hadn't asked to skip it. I'd been planning my presentation for weeks. My office was moved. Temporary renovation of your floor, they said. The new office was smaller, windowless, right next to the copy room. The constant noise made it impossible to take client calls. The renovation never seemed to finish. In meetings, Victoria started speaking over me, dismissing my input, questioning my analysis in front of clients in ways she never had before. Are you sure you're feeling well enough to handle this? She'd ask with false concern, her voice dripping with condescension. We don't want you overexerting yourself in your condition. Every accomplishment was diminished. Every minor mistake was magnified and documented. I was being managed out, systematically, professionally, with plausible deniability at every single step. By month 7, I'd lost 3 of my 4 major clients. My performance reviews, previously stellar, full of words like exceptional and invaluable, suddenly included phrases like distracted and not meeting expectations and commitment questions. I documented everything. Every email, every meeting note, every client reassignment. I kept meticulous records because some part of me knew exactly where this was heading. Daniel saw what was happening. He'd watch me come home exhausted, frustrated, sometimes in tears. Quit, he said one night after I'd spent 2 hours venting about another humiliation. You don't need this. We don't need the money. Just walk away. But I couldn't. It felt like surrender, like proving Victoria right. I've earned my place there, I told him, my voice breaking. I'm not letting her push me out. She's not just pushing, Daniel said quietly, pulling me close. She's orchestrating your exit, and she's doing it legally enough that fighting it will be nearly impossible. He was right, but I was too angry, too stubborn to see the full picture yet. Let her try, I said. I'm not going anywhere. Famous last words. The firing came at 8 months pregnant, 1 week before I was planning to start my maternity leave. Victoria called me into her office on a Tuesday morning. Her assistant, Michelle, looked at me with something that might have been pity as I walked past her desk. I should have known then. Sit down, Rachel, Victoria said without looking up from her computer. I sat. My back ached. My feet were swollen. I was exhausted from a pregnancy that had become increasingly difficult in the final trimester. This isn't working out, Victoria said, finally turning to face me. No preamble. No softening. Just cold, hard business. We're terminating your employment effective immediately. The words didn't register at first. They hung in the air like something foreign, something that couldn't possibly be meant for me. I'm sorry, what? Your performance has declined significantly over the past several months, she continued, her voice flat and rehearsed. We've given you numerous opportunities to improve. You haven't, so we're making a change. She slid a folder across the desk. Termination papers, already prepared, already signed by HR, already finalized. My hands shook as I opened it. This is illegal, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. You're firing me because I'm pregnant. This is textbook discrimination. I'm firing you because your performance is inadequate, Victoria corrected smoothly, as if she'd practiced this response. The fact that you're pregnant is incidental. Your recent reviews document clear performance issues. You've lost clients. You've missed deadlines. You've been, quite frankly, a liability to this firm. Every word was calculated, legal, prepared by attorneys who knew exactly how to construct a termination that would be difficult to challenge in court. I've brought this firm $7 million, I said, my voice rising now. $7 million in 3 years. My performance reviews were exemplary until the day I announced my pregnancy. Victoria emphasized, leaning forward slightly. Past performance doesn't excuse present failures. And frankly, Rachel, this shouldn't come as a surprise. We've had multiple conversations about your declining output. Declining output that started the moment you reassigned all my clients to other people. Clients were reassigned based on business needs and continuity concerns. That's standard practice. She was right. Technically, it was standard practice. That's what made it so insidious. You're making a terrible mistake, I said, standing up slowly, my hands gripping the edge of her desk. You have no idea what you're doing. Victoria smiled that cold, cruel smile I'd come to hate. No, Rachel, you made the mistake. You chose to have a child in the middle of building a career. You chose to split your focus. You chose to prioritize biology over ambition. She stood as well, meeting my eyes across the desk. You chose to be ordinary. She pressed the button on her phone. Michelle, please have security escort Miss Chen to collect her belongings. That won't be necessary, I said, my voice ice cold now. I know my way out. And before we continue, let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone completely underestimated you? Where they thought they had all the power, but they had no idea what was coming? Hit that subscribe button right now because what happens next is going to blow your mind. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have revealed who you were right then, or would you have waited like I did? Because trust me, patience is about to pay off in the most satisfying way possible. Now, back to the story. Rachel, Victoria called as I reached the door. I turned, one hand on the handle. Don't take this personally, she said, her voice almost gentle now, as if she were doing me a favor. You're a smart woman. You'll land on your feet. Maybe find something with better work-life balance. Something more suitable for your situation. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had mentored me, who I'd admired, who I'd modeled myself after. You're right about one thing, Victoria, I said quietly. I will land on my feet. But you're about to fall so far you won't even see the ground coming. Her brow furrowed slightly. Is that a threat? No, I said, opening the door. It's a promise. I walked out. Past Michelle's pitying look, past the whispered conversations that stopped when I passed, past 6 years of my life being packed into a cardboard box by someone from HR who wouldn't even meet my eyes. Daniel was waiting in the parking lot. I'd texted him on my way down. I got into the car, closed the door, and finally, let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. I'm so sorry, Daniel said, reaching for my hand. Don't be, I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. She just made the biggest mistake of her career. What do you mean? I turned to look at him. How much stake does Chen Capital have in Patterson and Associates? Daniel was quiet for a moment. We funded their expansion 3 years ago. We own 43% of the firm. Largest single shareholder. Controlling interest? With the right board votes? Yes. We're close with the founders. Why? I smiled for the first time that day. Not a happy smile. A smile that Victoria Patterson would have recognized immediately. Because she just fired the wrong person's wife, I said. And I want to watch her world burn. I didn't do anything immediately. That would have been emotional, reactive, easy to dismiss as revenge from a bitter ex-employee. Instead, I did what I do best. I built a case. I had 6 years of performance reviews. I had documentation of every client I'd brought in, every deal I'd closed, every dollar of revenue I'd generated. I had emails showing the systematic reassignment of my clients after my pregnancy announcement. I had meeting notes. I had witness statements from colleagues who'd watched it happen and felt sick about it. I also had something Victoria didn't know about. 2 weeks before my termination, I'd filed a confidential complaint with the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Pregnancy discrimination, hostile work environment, retaliation, wrongful termination in process. The EEOC investigates quietly. They don't announce themselves. They request documents. They interview employees under confidentiality. They build cases brick by brick. By the time Victoria learned there was an investigation, it was already too late to cover her tracks. But that was just the legal side. The business side was far more interesting. Daniel set up a meeting with the founders of Patterson and Associates. Richard Patterson, Victoria's uncle, who'd started the firm 40 years ago, and 2 other senior partners who'd retired but retained board seats and significant influence. I want to discuss our investment, Daniel told them in that calm, measured way that made billionaires nervous. We're concerned about management decisions that might affect firm value, reputation, and our return on investment. He didn't mention me at first. He presented it purely as fiduciary concern from a major shareholder. We've noticed increased employee turnover in the past 18 months, Daniel said, laying out spreadsheets and data, particularly among high-performing female staff. This represents both a talent retention issue and a significant legal liability. He showed them the numbers. 5 women terminated or pressured to resign in 2 years, all within a year of pregnancy or maternity leave, all previously high performers, all with exemplary reviews until their announcements. This is a pattern, Daniel said, letting that word hang in the air. And patterns like this attract class action lawsuits, expensive lawsuits, the kind that make headlines and destroy reputations. The founders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Victoria is a valuable leader, Richard Patterson said carefully, defensive of his niece. She's grown this firm significantly. She has, Daniel agreed, but at what cost? You're losing your best talent. You're exposing the firm to massive legal liability, and you're about to lose something else. What's that? Chen Capital's investment, Daniel said simply. If this firm becomes embroiled in a discrimination scandal, we'll have no choice but to divest. That's 43% of your ownership walking out the door, along with our reputation and our network. The room went silent. We're not asking for anything unreasonable, Daniel continued. We're asking for an independent investigation into HR practices. We're asking for policy reforms. And we're asking for accountability when those policies have been violated. He slid a folder across the conference table. This is documentation of a specific case we believe represents a clear violation of federal employment law. We think you should review it before the EEOC makes their findings public. Richard Patterson opened the folder. His face went pale as he read the name at the top. Rachel Chen Morrison. He looked up at Daniel, then at me, sitting quietly in the corner of the room where I'd been observing the entire meeting. Your wife, he said quietly. My wife, Daniel confirmed, who brought this firm $7 million in 3 years, who was systematically stripped of her clients, her office, and her dignity the moment she announced her pregnancy, who was terminated 1 week before her planned maternity leave with fabricated performance issues. I stood and walked to the table. I don't want revenge, I said, looking each founder in the eye. I want justice. For me, for Sarah, for Jennifer, for every woman who's been pushed out of this firm for the crime of wanting both a career and a family. Victoria will fight this, one of the other partners said. She can try, I said. But the EEOC doesn't care about well-written termination papers. They care about patterns, and the pattern here is crystal clear. It took 48 hours. 48 hours for the board to review the evidence. 48 hours for the EEOC investigation to become public knowledge. 48 hours for Victoria Patterson's carefully constructed world to collapse. The board called an emergency meeting. Victoria was summoned. She arrived confident, probably assuming it was about quarterly numbers or a new client. She walked into that conference room and saw me sitting next to Daniel, both of us at the head of the table with the founders. I'll never forget the look on her face. That moment when understanding dawned, when she realized exactly who I was, who I'd always been. What is this? Victoria demanded, looking at her uncle. Sit down, Victoria, Richard Patterson said quietly. I will not. Sit down. She sat. Richard slid the EEOC complaint across the table to her, then the documentation of the pattern of discrimination, then the financial analysis showing the firm's exposure. You've created a liability we can't afford, Richard said, his voice heavy with disappointment. More than that, you violated everything this firm was supposed to stand for. That complaint is baseless, Victoria said. But her voice lacked its usual confidence. Rachel's performance was declining. I have reviews. Reviews that miraculously became negative the moment she announced her pregnancy, I interrupted. After 6 years of exceptional performance, after bringing in $7 million, that's not a performance issue, Victoria. That's discrimination. She turned to me, and for the first time, I saw something other than ice in her eyes. I saw fear. You don't understand the pressure of running a firm, she said. The sacrifices required. The dedication. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice calm. I understand that you sacrificed your personal life for your career, that you gave up having a family to build this firm, and I respect that choice. That was your choice to make. I leaned forward. But you don't get to punish other women for making a different choice. You don't get to destroy careers because you resent that we might actually have what you gave up. Victoria's hands clenched on the table. You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? I stood up, walking slowly around the table toward her. You saw me as a younger version of yourself. Ambitious. Driven. Willing to sacrifice. And when I chose not to sacrifice my chance at motherhood, you saw it as a betrayal. As weakness. As proof that I wasn't as committed as you were. I stopped directly across from her. But here's what you failed to understand, Victoria. I didn't choose between career and family. I chose both. And the only reason you couldn't do the same is because women like you, in your generation, weren't given that option. But instead of fighting for the women coming after you, instead of making it easier for us, you became the very thing that held us back. The room was silent. You're fired, Victoria, Richard Patterson said quietly. Effective immediately. We'll announce your resignation for personal reasons. You'll receive your contractual severance, but nothing more. And you'll sign a non-compete agreement that will keep you out of this industry for 5 years. Victoria's face went white. You can't. We can, another founder said. And we are. You've exposed this firm to a lawsuit we'll likely lose. You've destroyed our reputation with our talent, and you violated the trust we placed in you. This is because of her? Victoria said, pointing at me. Because she married money and decided to use it? No, I said quietly. This is because you systematically discriminated against pregnant women, documented it in writing, and thought you were smart enough to get away with it. I just made sure the right people knew. Security was called. Victoria was escorted out, just like she'd had me escorted out 48 hours earlier. But unlike me, she wouldn't be landing on her feet. After she left, Richard Patterson turned to me. What do you want, Rachel? He asked. A settlement? Your job back? Name your terms. I looked at Daniel, who nodded. I want 3 things, I said. First, I want a formal apology from this firm, in writing, admitting wrongdoing. Second, I want mandatory anti-discrimination training for all management, conducted by an independent firm. And third, I want this firm to establish a parental leave policy that actually supports working parents, 6 months paid leave, flexible return to work options, and explicit protection against retaliation. And for yourself? Richard asked. Financially? Keep your money, I said. Put it toward the policy changes. My husband and I don't need your settlement. But the women who come after me need those protections. I headed toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and one more thing. I want my junior partner position. Not as a settlement, as recognition that I earned it 3 years ago. Richard smiled for the first time that day. Done. 6 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. We named her Victoria. Not after my former boss, after Victory. I took my 6 months of paid parental leave, the leave that I'd helped create. The leave that would protect every parent at Patterson and Associates from what had happened to me. When I returned as a junior partner. My office had windows again. My clients had been waiting for me. And the culture had shifted. Not completely, but noticeably. Sarah Martinez came back to the firm. So did Jennifer Walsh. Both as senior consultants with protected positions and flexible schedules. Victoria Patterson's career never recovered. The EEOC investigation became public. The pattern of discrimination was undeniable. She settled 3 separate lawsuits from women she'd pushed out over the years. She tried to join 2 other firms. Both declined once they saw her history. Last I heard, she was consulting independently from home, working with small clients, a fraction of the power and prestige she once had. Some people might feel sorry for her. I don't. Not because I'm cruel, but because she had every opportunity to be different, to be better, to lift other women up instead of tearing them down. She chose differently. Daniel and I still laugh about that day sometimes. About how Victoria had no idea she was firing the wife of her firm's largest shareholder. About how she'd spent 6 years mentoring me, never once asking about my personal life, never once curious enough to learn who I'd married. She never even Googled you, Daniel said one night while we were giving Victoria her bottle. She thought she knew everything she needed to know, I said. That was always her problem. She assumed. She judged. She underestimated. Her loss, Daniel said, kissing the top of my head. Our gain. And before I let you go, I want to ask you one final question. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever had someone try to push you out, tear you down, or make you feel like you had to choose between different parts of your life? If this story resonated with you, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to this channel for more stories of people who refuse to stay down, and drop a comment telling me about a time someone underestimated you. I read every single comment, and your stories inspire the ones I tell. Now here's the lesson I learned from all of this. Power doesn't always look like power. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's patient. Sometimes it wears a maternity dress and lets you think you've won. Victoria Patterson thought she was firing a liability. What she actually did was reveal her own. She thought she was protecting her firm. What she actually did was expose its rot. She thought she was teaching me a lesson about sacrifice. What she actually did was teach me that women don't have to choose. We just have to be strategic enough to dismantle the systems that say we do. I didn't burn Victoria's career to the ground because I was vindictive. I did it because patterns like hers don't end until someone forces them to end. Because every woman she pushed out before me deserved justice. And because every woman who comes after me deserves better. So yes, they fired me for being pregnant. And yes, I made them regret it. But more importantly, I made sure it could never happen to anyone else. That's not revenge. That's revolution. And if you're facing something similar right now, remember this. Document everything. Know your rights. Build your case. And when the moment comes, don't just fight for yourself. Fight for everyone who comes after you. Because that's how we change things. One pattern broken at a time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next story.